Hi, everyone. We'll start in just a few minutes, but if you have any questions, you can just drop them in the chat and I'll address them as soon as we start. Guys, how are you doing this evening? All right, so I know that we have obviously started a little bit late. I'm not sure if you guys have received any communication from VC. I know that I have received a few queries with regards to those of you who have received comms for an extension for those of you who registered slightly later. They haven't told us very much about it. As I understand, only select students obviously qualify for it, and they didn't send the messages to everyone's, but they have to obviously send the communication to the entire group, even though not everyone in the group will qualify. That is the only notification we've received thus far. So I was wondering if any of you are sorry, not affected, in which case you do have to submit in the 2 days. Are there any questions that you have regarding the assignment? Would you like me, alternatively, would you guys like me to focus on going through the assignment? Or what we can do is finish off chapter 3 and do a quick revision of chapter 1 and 2, and then we can look at chapter 3. Or we can, sorry, it's actually chapter 4, it's learning unit 3. So if you guys have any specific questions regarding the assignment, or if you would like me to just go through the whole assignment, or would you prefer me to just stick to the work and then if you have any questions that can come up, or I can address them?
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thanks, Jolene. And yourself?
I'm good, thanks. I would prefer if you would stick to the work and then if there's any questions at the end of it, if no one else has received or doesn't seem like anyone else has not received the concession. About the concession, yes, I did check with the student assist, so they were very informative on that.
Wonderful. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah, so I would prefer if you would just do stick to the work and then we can
And
ask
then,
questions at the end. Yeah.
okay. All right. So I see Johannes would like me to look at the assignment. So what I'm going to do is sort of a blend between the two. Okay. So I'll very quickly cover the work that we covered in last week's session, just as a bit of revision. Then I will cover the last section of work we need to cover before for this assignment. And then I will walk you through the assignment and just sort of point out where you could find information. And if you guys have any, oh, specifically question 5.1, okay, then we can focus on that. Also, Deval, I think 5.1, I speak under correction, but I believe that is demand and supply curves, which we will also cover now. So if there are any questions after that, then I'm pretty sure, oh, hopefully we can address most of it in just the normal course of our work. So let me just open up ARC. Here's my lecture resources. Okay, guys, so for the purposes of this assignment, you have 3 learning units that you have to focus on. So it is what is economics all about, the economic systems and flows, demand and supply, prices. Okay. So what economics is all about, I'm just going to give you a very quick overview. We're predominantly concerned with our key economic problem is that we have unlimited wants as a population, but we have access to limited resources. So economics comes into play where we have to decide how to best satisfy our wants with our limited resources. And obviously, every time we make a choice, we are causing a ripple effect in the format of an opportunity cost. Okay, so in other words, if we only have limited resources available, we have to make a choice between one or the other. But what opportunity cost is the cost of the closest option foregone. So if you're deciding between, say, tea and coffee, if you decide to have tea, obviously you're not going to have coffee at the same time. You're sacrificing your coffee resources to have your tea resources. Okay. In this section, we cover 3 main themes. So this is introducing basic concepts. The concepts that we're most concerned about are, like we said, scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost. We do look at microeconomics and macroeconomics. So microeconomics is only concerned with the behaviors and decisions of individuals and individual businesses or firms. Macroeconomics is concerned with the economy as a whole. So how do we spend our national income as opposed to how an individual spends their private income? Okay, we're also concerned with what is economics in general. We have discussed, obviously, the fact that it's all about, scarcity of resources and unlimited wants across a country. So economics encompasses how we plan to produce, distribute, and consume those goods and services to make the most number of people happy. Okay, and because we are focused on people in economics, it is a social science. Okay, we do look at, okay, so after we've introduced these basic concepts, we have this beautiful thing called the PPC. Okay, it's the Productions Possibility Curve or the Production Possibility Frontier. Now, what this graph is, let me just show you an example. Okay, so if we are looking at this example, the PPC, which I believe they actually make you do in the activity as well. Obviously, you guys have the Candyland example, and then they ask you to put marshmallows on the y-axis, and they ask you to put, or it's a cotton candy on the x-axis. Okay, important things to know here. Any point on the graph is both attainable on the actual line graph. It is both attainable and it is efficient. Any point inside the graph is inefficient. Any point outside the graph is unattainable. Okay. Every decision you make, okay, so if you are deciding to have more, what is this, wine and TVs. So if you were decided that you would ordinarily have 9,000 bottles of wine or 900,000 bottles of wine or 4 TVs, you could equally decide to shift your resources to making only 500,000 bottles of wine and 9,000 TVs. Okay. The reason that we show the products on both the X and Y axis is because you're showing what you are losing to gain something else. Okay, so there is an indirect relationship here. You're going to give up 400,000 bottles of wine in order to gain 500,000 TVs or 500 units of TVs. Okay. That is the PPC. Again, we will cover that in a little bit more detail when we go through the assignment. Goodness. It's down here. Here we go. All right. That's the PPC. Then, obviously, what we also cover, the last theme for your learning unit 1 are the common mistakes that economists make. Here you are concerned with either correlation or causation. Correlation is I drank tea and I was engaged in some form of accident, a car accident. That is simply correlation. because I was drinking tea, it doesn't mean that the tea has caused my accident. Okay, of course, if it was an Irish coffee, on the other hand, and then I had an accident, there would be a good cause or a good case for causation there. Because I consumed alcohol and then I had an accident, therefore the one caused the other. Okay, these are typical issues that economists generally face. We also look at normative and positive statements. So normative statements tend to be statements that express an opinion. They express a narrative. That's an easy way to remember it. As opposed to a positive statement. A positive statement is supported by some form of facts. Okay. Then we're going to learning unit 2. Again, we did cover this in quite a bit of detail last week. So if you want to revise that, I will, once I gain access to your ArcSite, I will make all the recordings available to you. Okay, so for the economic systems, we are concerned with 3 central questions. Okay, so it's all about economic decision making. We are concerned with what is produced, how it's produced, and who we're producing it for. Okay, the questions that are answered and who answers them is determined by your economic system. So you either have a very traditional system, in which case it's almost like a bartering system. It's the oldest system we have. There's no money involved. Or you have a command system, in which case that's an example would be North Korea. There, the government owns all the factors of production. Okay, factors of production being CELL, cell. It's capital, entrepreneurship, land, and labor. Okay, so those 4 factors of production are either owned by the state, the government, in a command system, or in a market economy, the people and the businesses, or actually it's just the people that own the factors of production. Okay. In mixed economies, like what we have in South Africa, obviously the closest we have to a market economy is the US. It's supposed to be the freest market. And then we have mixed economic systems, which combine both command and market. So we have elements of a lot of regulation, like in South Africa, but we also have a lot of freedom to our market as well. We own the factors of production. We sell our labor to the firms, and they then remunerate us in the form of wages. Okay, so then, okay, yes. Now we're going to look at the economic flow very quickly. So we have Theme 1, which is our 3 economic questions and your different economic systems. Please feel free to peruse. And if you can do this activity, 2.1.1, it is just a little bit of a help. Also, again, it feeds into, I believe, question 3 in your assignment. Not so much the diagram, but the tabulated version of it. So if you would prefer to give me the tabulated version, just so that you have a collection of all of your notes in one place, please provide me with that instead, and I will mark accordingly. Okay, then Theme 2, now we have our major flows, participants, and markets. So here, this is a very useful activity to do, 2.2.1. Okay, all you're going to be doing is describing the relationship between these key participants, the 3 major flows, and the main markets. Okay, I just want to show you an example of that. Okay, this diagram here, move this. Okay, this diagram indicates or depicts our circular flow of economic activity. Whenever you talk about circular flow, this is the diagram they're referring to. You will find it in chapter 3. Just want to tell you exactly where. Okay, so on chapter 3, on page 56 is where we cover the 4 factors of production. and how they are each remunerated. So obviously we sell our factors of production to the businesses and they remunerate us. Okay, so obviously land receives rent, capital receives interest, labor receives wages, and entrepreneurship receives profits. You will see that on page 58 of your textbook. For the purposes of microeconomics, which you cover in the first semester, you will only need to know about the households and the firms. They are the only two market participants we acknowledge at this point. You can ignore page 66 and 61. Okay, for now, we have no government, we have no foreign sector. We only have businesses which buy our factors of production from the factor market and individuals which supply the factors of production to the factor market. In the factor market, as the name implies, you can only buy factors of production. However, once the businesses have converted these factors of production into useful goods and services, they supply them to the product market, and consumers can then spend their hard-earned income in the form of rent, interest, profit, or the last one, wages, in the product market in return for goods. So that's obviously, so the whole system is we own our factors of production, we sell them to various factor markets. Businesses buy them, they produce the products, and we once again buy the products. Okay, that is your circular flow. You'll find it on page 63. How you differentiate between them is that on page 62, figure 3.2 indicates your three economic flows. In your economy, you can only produce something, you can spend your money, or you can earn an income. Okay, so those are your three flows. Your only two market participants are the households and firms, and you only have two markets, the product and the factor market. Our final theme for learning unit 2 is stocks and flows. Okay, so stocks are values that are calculated at one point in time, whereas flows are calculated over a period of time. Okay, I find it very useful to do activity 2.3.1. Obviously, this is if you have some time, I would obviously prefer you to focus on your assignment, but this is a very nice activity just to ensure that you understand the difference between the two. Okay, this is obviously a recurring theme all through the year, so again, very useful to know. And finally, okay, so now that we are into the new section of work, we're going to be looking at demand, supply, and prices. Okay, so this is also related directly to question 5 in your assignment. So, just see here if I can get a nice graph to begin with. Okay, here what we have is a depiction of two laws at once. Okay, so all supply and demand graphs have to have price on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis. The law of demand stipulates that the lower the price, the more we will demand. And you can see that depicted here. At this point, so here, look at how low this quantity is. This would be the equivalent of 1 and a price that is quite considerably higher. So here at the start of our demand graph, we can see that the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded from the consumer. And so it continues. The lower the price gets, the higher the quantity demanded. And that is the law of demand. On the other hand, the law of supply, okay, so now you have to be empathetic to the opposite side. With the law of supply, as a supplier, as the price rises, the more you are willing to offer. Okay, so the more you are willing to supply as the price rises. Okay, so there are a number of different things that impact your demand and supply curves. Actually, let's go back to this graph, just a little bit cleaner. Okay. There are a number of factors that influence this relationship. The only things that don't move or shift the curve is price. So any change in price. So for example, if we were demanding here at price P, okay, so here price P, let's say that's 20 Rand. We would demand, say, 20 apples at price P. Okay, that is the quantity we would demand. We at a price of 20, we would, I'm sorry, at a price of P, we demand 20 apples. If the price were to be reduced, we would demand substantially more apples. How would we know how many more? We'd have to move along our demand curve down to the new price and then look at the quantity that it is referring to on the x-axis. Okay, maybe I can, here is a better example. Okay, so this is just a little Excel graph that I've drawn up for you guys just to explain very quickly demand and supply. Okay, so as long as we are on this graph, if we are being supplied with 10 units or something, okay, yeah, let's say, what should we say? Something interesting. TVs. Okay, let's go back to TVs. At a price of no, that's too cheap. Let's look at Energade. Okay, let's just say Energade. Okay, so at a price of 40 Rand, we would only demand 10 units. Okay, as you can see, this corresponds perfectly here. So 40 Rand, only 10 units is what we demand. Okay. However, the suppliers would feel differently. At 40 Rand, they want to supply 40 units because obviously it's more profitable for them to supply more at a higher price. So price is, as long as your price is the only thing that is changing. Ceteris paribus. Okay, ceteris paribus is a term you will hear quite often in economics. What it refers to is it means all other things remaining equal. So all other factors remaining equal, if price is the only thing to change, you are simply just moving up or down your y-axis and then finding a corresponding x value for your demand curve, okay, which is in blue here. However, there are a number of things that move the graph. Okay, so if we refer back to your textbook, you will see on page 75 a list of things. Okay, so obviously you can go through this in your own time. All of this, the beginning part of this chapter is explaining to you is that demand and supply can be depicted in many ways. Here on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see I've depicted it as a schedule. Okay, I've given it specific values and a specific table. Here, we're depicting demand and supply as a graph. We can also depict it formulaically. Okay, you'll see that on page 76. There are specific formulae we use. If you turn to page 82, however, you'll see a summary of all of your different factors, how they can change, and then what impact they would have on the demand curve. Okay, so let's look at these very quickly. So if the price of a good increases, we know that there is no shift in the curve. We simply move up and down based on the y-axis. Okay. However, if there is, okay, like in 5.1 or 5.2 of your assignment, they then ask you what happens if petroleum jelly is a complementary good or a joint production good of petroleum, and then the price of petroleum goes up. Okay, what would that mean for our supply curve? Okay, let's actually just draw a supply curve quickly. Okay, so here, just going to put this in orange, and we're just going to rotate it. Okay. Now, what would happen to the supply side of a graph where a petroleum product increases its price? Okay, guys, it's very important that you just remember that any increase, okay, as you will see in the table I have shown you in your textbook, this line is extra, any increase will always result in a shift of the demand curve to the right, okay? It will always indicate an increase in demand. You can see that. So here in this case, petroleum jelly has now increased, petroleum has increased in price. Because we want to sell more petrol at a higher price as suppliers, we would have this curve in action. Okay, because we're looking at petroleum jelly in this specific graph, we have to look at how it is impacted. Because we are trying to produce and sell more petroleum, the demand that we, or the amount, the quantity that we supply to the market will now, of jelly, will now also increase proportionally. Because if we are pulling the one out of the ground or refining the petroleum, we are also creating the byproduct of petroleum jelly. So an increase in price will encourage suppliers to supply more and therefore also increase the supply of petroleum jelly. Okay, what will that do? Obviously, now the demand curve hasn't shifted for petroleum jelly. So people are still demanding exactly the same amount, ceteris paribus. So only this factor has shifted. What is the result? Because you also obviously have to explain it. We have moved from a market clearance level of here, 25, a quantity of 25 grams being supplied at a price of 25. We have now moved down our demand curve. Why? Because the supply has increased. It has increased the amount of petroleum jelly available, which has now decreased our competitiveness to like beat each other to grab the only bottles of petroleum jelly available. So therefore, we now are less competitive in our nature. So we're saying, okay, since more is available, we'll pay slightly less. Okay, because this comes back to our original economic problem. We have unlimited wants and scarce resources. So if something happens that allows the increase in supply without an increase in demand, what will inevitably happen is the price will drop and the quantity supplied has already been increased. Okay. If, however, there is an increase in income, same thing, something here will happen. Okay, so if there is a increase in income for your constituents within your country, or there's a shift in taste. So say, for example, we've just found out that petroleum jelly alleviates wrinkles. Okay. All of a sudden, the demand for petroleum jelly would shift to the right. Why is it shifting to the right? Because the reason that the demand has increased has nothing to do with the price of the petroleum jelly. We have found something new. We found out that it solves the problem of wrinkles. So now we are demanding more. And because the supply cannot readily just adjust, what we cause for ourselves is an increase in price. Right? Why? Because now there is more demand and less of the petroleum jelly available for us to buy it. So we almost end up in a bidding war where we say, okay, I'll pay slightly more to get the last batch of petroleum jelly. Okay. Same thing can happen for tastes and preferences. If we, on the other hand, were to find out that petroleum jelly is toxic, okay, or causes some sort of cancer or skin cancer, my goodness, not everyone would believe it, so the immediate supply would not change. Okay. It takes a while for them. Obviously, we know, from the question later on, 5.3, we know that petroleum jelly is produced as a byproduct or a joint product of petroleum. So therefore, we know that if we find out that it's toxic, the supply may not be able to shift because we still always need petrol, but the demand for petroleum jelly would experience a shock. Now, fewer people want the petroleum jelly because now we found out, according to tastes or preferences, that this is somehow harmful, it's toxic, so that would cause a shift of the demand curve to the left, closer to the origin. What has happened here? Because the supply didn't change, we just simply started demanding less. Because of that, we have now reduced the quantity that we've demanded. And as a result, the price also drops. Because you guys know, I don't know if you subscribe to any Udemy courses, but for example, as soon as the demand is starting to drop on a specific course, that's the time that they start actioning specials because they're trying to encourage you to use the course again. Okay, so the same thing happens. It's simply they use it in every aspect of retail. It is simply the law of demand. If you want to encourage people to buy more, you either need to impact the price, in which case there is no shift in the demand curve, or you could release some information that makes your product more attractive, and that would cause a shock to the demand and it would shift your curve to the right. Alternatively, we could find out that something is harmful and that would shift the demand curve to the left. Obviously, we have already looked at supply as well, but if you go on to page 83 and 85, they show you the same things. In box 4.1 on page 84 of your textbook, they show you the other determinants of supply. So there are unexpected events. For example, if we find out that petroleum has now gotten substantially more expensive, obviously that would also impact the demand. Okay, obviously that would be price related, so therefore it has nothing to do with this. So let's say it would do a shift down the curve. Okay. So on page 85, you will, actually, on page 86, you will find a summary of all of your different determinants, how they can change, and what the effect on your market supply curve is. Okay. For the purposes of this assignment, you are only expected to shift one of these two graphs, not both of them at the same time. Okay. And then you only have to tell us what has happened to the graph and then tell us what has happened to the market clearance price or the market equilibrium. Okay. Okay. The last section of chapter 4 is consumer and producer surplus. Okay. Now, consumer surplus is depicted by okay, let me see if I can do this because this gets a little bit confusing. Okay, guys, as you can see, this line here indicates the market clearance price. What that is telling us is that at, what is that, say 25 Rand, we have reached a point where the demand and the supply curves meet. In other words, we are demanding a quantity at a price that the supplier is willing to meet. So this point is determined by market forces of demand and supply. However, as you can see, there is still somebody who is willing to pay 50 Rand in this market for, say, 0.1 grams of the product. Okay. For the supplier, or rather for the consumer, this represents the surplus. The difference between what some consumers are willing to pay and what we actually end up paying for the product. So our market clearance point here, just insert little text box. Okay, this is our equilibrium point. Right here where the two forces meet. The difference, your consumer surplus is described as the difference in price between the top of your curve, what someone is willing to pay, versus what we actually pay in the market. So it is the 50 Rand less the 25 Rand market equilibrium price. On the other hand, your producer surplus is the difference between what the supplier would like you to pay and what you are willing to pay. So what are they willing to supply at this price, let's say 10, versus what we are actually paying. So, okay, this shouldn't end at 0. So let's just increase this a little bit. Quantity supply. Make this 5. Okay. Sorry, I'm just going to curve this a little bit so it makes a little bit more sense. So here, at 5 Rand, our producer is willing to still supply a quantity of 5. What they actually end up supplying is your market equilibrium. So they are supplying 20 units. They are supplying 25 units at a price of 25 Rand. But they were willing to sell just 5 units at 5 Rand. Now, because we're economists, we're not always as concerned about the quantity as we are about the difference in price. So if they ask you for a consumer or a producer surplus, as they do in question 5, it is the difference between the price that the producer was willing to supply at and the price he actually gets in the market. Okay, that is how you explain it. If you want a depiction of how you can do this in the graph, it is exactly these triangles. If you can see it here, it is the difference between your supply curve up to your market equilibrium and then straight across to your market equilibrium price. Okay, that bottom triangle is your producer surplus. The triangle above your market equilibrium, the one that starts with your demand curve and ends with your market equilibrium price, with your equilibrium point in between, this triangle is your consumer surplus. Okay, that is on page 89 if you just need something to refer to. Guys, are there any questions relating to anything we've already covered before I move on to the assignment? Okay. If you do have any questions, I honestly understand that demand and supply is not an easy thing to grasp the first time you encounter it. It's the same as the PPC curves. The graphs are always the most difficult thing to grasp. If you guys need help, please drop me an email. I don't have access to your ArcSight, which means I don't have access to your email list as yet. What I will try and do is share my summaries as soon as I get access. But if you do want my summaries on the textbook, please just drop me an email and I'll send it all through to you. In the meantime, I'm just going to fly through the assignment very quickly so that I can hopefully answer most questions. Okay, if you have any questions that you'd like me to specifically address, please just pop them into the chat or open your mic and we can chat about it. Okay, here very quickly, question 1, all of your true and false questions. Okay, so they are scattered across chapters 1 to 4. But the first one obviously relates to economic scarcity. It doesn't matter how developed you are as a country, you will always have a problem with scarcity because people have unlimited wants, which means that it doesn't matter how many resources you have or produce, you will always have a scarcity. Air pollution obviously becomes a big problem in specific areas, and it's the reason that we pay for air cons in some areas of the world. So something that is free, like air, all of a sudden, if you want to improve the quality, you need to pay for it. Okay, so it's no longer a free good, it is now a commodity. If you need another example, replace air pollution with water pollution and think about the last time you drank out of a tap. Okay. Okay, income associated with labor. You guys know about the 4 factors of production. Rent and labor obviously don't go together. Rent goes with land. The goods market is not involved in transformation. There are only 2 markets. It's the factor market and the goods market, and the goods market is for buying goods and services. Consumer surplus is the difference between what the consumers pay and the maximum amount they were willing to pay. So obviously that's the top of your demand curve and the market equilibrium price. Okay. Question 2, guys, this is your economic flow. Okay, very quickly, all you need to do, if you can picture it, I'll actually just go back. Okay, your economic flow is exactly this. Okay, you don't have to make it quite as complicated as this, but quite simply, you need your 2 market participants, which are businesses and individuals. You need your 2 markets, product and factor. As long as your market participants and your markets are opposite one another, your economic flow should work. And use logic, okay? So what flows into your factor markets? There's your factors of production. What do they receive in return? Income. What does that income take the form of it as it leaves the businesses? It takes the form of rent, interest, profit, and wages. They provide goods and services into the product market, and those goods and services are then bought by individuals using the income they receive from businesses through the factor market to buy the goods and services that are produced by the businesses. Okay, I know that was a mouthful, but again, it is in your textbook in chapter 3 if you need a reference, okay? All you need to do to make it pertinent specifically to this case study is you have to incorporate electric vehicles. So your goods market will be considered of electric vehicles, finished goods only, and your factor market will be the things that the businesses need to buy from the government in order to produce their businesses. Okay, I suppose they're trying to look at this not as a command economy. So they would be buying it from the individuals. They're buying the factors of production from the individuals. Okay. In question 3, we have Candyland, okay? So here, I just want to refer you quickly to this graph. You will notice that they have given you no actual numbers. Okay, which means that your PPC is simply the shape of the curve. All you need to remember, on your y-axis, you're going to put your cotton candy, and on your x-axis, you're going to put your marshmallows. Okay. All your PPC is trying to tell you as a concept is it depicts, hold on, I did find this, it is on page 6. Yes, on page 6 of your textbook. Your production possibility curve indicates the different combinations of your two products that can be produced with all available resources within your economy operating at key levels of efficiency, at optimal efficiency. Okay. So you are simply saying, if I produced no marshmallows at all, how much cotton candy would I produce? Then for every cotton candy or 100 kilograms of cotton candy, I'm willing to sacrifice how many marshmallows do I gain? That is all the PPC is telling you. Okay, so what this is depicting is everything we can actually produce within our economy. The scarcity aspect is obviously that we want infinite amounts of cotton candy and marshmallows, but we only have so many resources within our economy. That draws us to one inescapable conclusion. We must make a choice. How much cotton candy? How many marshmallows? Okay, at point 2, we would have 90 units of cotton candy and only 2 marshmallows. Okay, but if we move further down the curve here, I could sacrifice only 10 kilograms of cotton candy and gain, say, 1 extra marshmallow. That's essentially the choice. Okay, so opportunity cost is how much are you gaining in one product and how much are you sacrificing in the other. Your opportunity cost is done from the reflection or from the point of view of the thing that you have lost. Okay, so in this case, I had peak cotton candy production, but as I lose cotton candy, I am gaining marshmallows. But how much cotton candy am I losing at each point to gain just 1 extra marshmallow? Okay, that is your 3 concepts of scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost illustrated on the PPC. Here I've shown you 3.3. Marshmallows need to be indicated on your y-axis, and x-axis indicates your cotton candy. Did I switch it? I did switch them. Apologies. This should be marshmallows. And this should be cotton candy. Okay. Now they have asked you to indicate various points on your PPC. Okay. Any point that you show here on the graph, on the actual line, is attainable and efficient. So if we refer back here, point A and point C, okay, can be depicted by any place on the graph. So as long as you put point A here and point C here, it is correct. You are showing that on the graph, you are both efficient and it is attainable. If they're asking you for the inefficiency, it is any point within this curve. Why? Because we could be producing at the curve, but we choose to produce at a lower level, or we have some sort of inefficiency in our system. So if we look here, for example, if we were producing what were those points? An inefficient combination. So here is D. Okay. This is point D, which means at this point we are producing only this many marshmallows. Okay. But we could be producing this level of cotton candy and marshmallows, and yet we're producing at far less of both of the products that we actually need. Okay, so point D here, any point inside the graph is inefficient. Any point, however, let me see here, there we go, point D. Lastly, B. Any point outside the graph, however, is unattainable. It is beyond the scarcity of our resources. We cannot produce at point B. We can only produce at point A or C, which is on the curve. That is all that is obtainable. Okay, now they ask us finally to illustrate on this graph what would happen if we improve the technique to produce more marshmallows with the same amount of sugar. Okay, guys, what that is showing us is that the curve is actually, okay, here. Is this a curve? In this case, what would happen to this curve is it would actually remain here at cotton candy. So here at point, what is this, 0.6, we are receiving 0 marshmallows, all cotton candy. Okay, so that means that the increase in efficiency in producing marshmallows has 0 impact at 0.6. Okay, right here at the edge, where it's when it's on the x-intercept. As we move, however, this curve, because we are now able with exactly the same resources to produce more marshmallows, what would happen is that this entire graph would shift. Oh, of course it would do that. Let's see if I can pull it back. There we go. Okay, what would happen here is that this graph would stay exactly there, and this one would grow. So obviously we change this to marshmallows. So now what they are saying is, even though we were unable to, we haven't figured out how to produce more cotton candy, we're still producing either no marshmallows and 6 units of cotton candy, or now with our new production techniques, we can produce at higher levels at every combination. And if we were to choose to produce absolutely no cotton candy, we would still be able to produce at least 20% more marshmallows. So if they're asking you for this curve, all you have to do is keep the original point here, which it's going to do, there we go, at 0.6, but your curve would now extend beyond what you could originally produce in marshmallows and would go up the chart, because now for every level of cotton candy, you are receiving more marshmallows due to the increased efficiency. Any questions so far? Are we okay? All right, guys. Okay, I know I'm coming to the end of my session with you, so very quickly. Okay, here you have your economic systems. What I would suggest is to look to obviously tabulate this. You do have to do it in an essay form. A simple introduction would include what are economic systems. Okay, so there you can mention the 3 questions, for example. The body would be each different economic system needs to have its own separate paragraph. Tell me, what are the key characteristics of each system. Okay, so traditional is ancient. It was the original way we built our economic systems. Give me examples of real countries that still operate that way. Look at your command systems. Who owns your factors of production? Who decides on your three economic choices or economic questions? Who decides what factors of production go into effect and how we produce and what we produce and who we produce for? What does a market economic system look like? Okay, you'll find that you'll actually see if I can direct you exactly to the pages you need to consider. It is in chapter 2. From page 34, I would suggest reading the first paragraph of each bold heading. So you've got traditional, command, market, and mixed. Just the bold words will give you the main characteristics of each of these economic systems, okay? Sort of focus around those things. You'll see how quickly your 300 words gets used up. And try not to use, just be wary. Look, the problem with AIs is that they give you too much information, even if you ask them to restrict it. It's very easy instead to just look at your textbook and just summarize like the bolded words, the first paragraph, and you'll pretty much nail everything I need from you there. Okay, so here we talked about the petroleum jelly. Here's question 5. Here are your different movements. Okay, so this is your demand and supply curve. 5.1. All that happens is your demand curve here has to shift to the left. Why? Because absolutely nothing has happened to price. Oh, goodness. What did I do? Okay, absolutely nothing has happened to price. But we have had a bit of information come out that is contrary to what other people believed. So now it was unexpected. So we have a shift in this demand curve because now people are demanding less at lower prices. How do you explain that? First, tell me what you can describe your actual axes. Okay, tell me that it's price and quantity you're concerned with, that this everyone becoming increasingly aware of the toxins has thus shifted your demand curve to the left. You must use those words shift and to the left. Okay. And then you say to your new equilibrium price, then tell me what price and what quantity you would hypothetically be at. Okay, obviously you just need to show me that the price and quantity would both be lower because the demand curve has shifted to the left. Okay. 5.2, we looked at complementary goods. Now, the problem with this one is that you have to draw a brand new graph. Again, show me your demand and supply curve, just simply an X in the middle of your axes, and then show me how your supply graph shifts to the right here. Why? Because we would want to supply more petroleum at a higher price, and unfortunately or fortunately, petroleum jelly is a byproduct or a joint production product. So we would inadvertently make more of it as we're trying to produce more petroleum. So that would cause a shift in the right of your supply curve. Then again, when you're explaining to me, because remember your graph is only 5 marks, okay? So just the original X gives you the 4 and then the shift gives you 0.5. Please label your axes, both your X and your Y. Very important. And then when you're explaining it to me, start with your axes, show me your demand and supply curves where they originally are. Then tell me that they shift, the supply curve shifts rightward. And then what is the impact on both price and quantity at your new equilibrium price, at your new equilibrium or market clearing price, where your demand curve hasn't moved at all. Here, 5.3, they are asking you to describe a producer surplus. Okay, so here, draw a brand new graph. exactly the same thing. The only thing you're going to do differently is you're going to set this curve, this line. You're going to draw an extra line. So this should actually continue. Why is it? My goodness, it's changed colors for some reason. I have no idea why. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to put your line here. Okay, so this is what they are actually willing to supply to the market. This is exactly how your curve will end up looking. Okay, here is your X and Y axes. Here is your demand curve, your supply curve. But now what is happening is that, where's 5.3? Suppose the producers of your petroleum jelly are willing to supply 200 grams at a price of 10 Rand. What we're most concerned with here is the pricing. However, the market clearance price is 15 Rand. So what we're concerned with is this market clearance price, okay, it's at 25 Rand now. Obviously, in your example, it's 15 Rand, but they are willing to supply it at 10 Rand, which means that in this example, there's a 15 Rand difference. In this example, there is a 10 Rand difference. Okay. That is what they are willing to supply. It's the producer surplus is the difference between what they are willing to supply at a very, at their, what they are willing to supply at the lowest possible price versus what they actually get at the market clearance price. 3 determinants, the last thing you have to do, here we go. 3 determinants of market supply. Other than prices of alternative or joint prices, guys, I have told you on page 68, there is a summary. Pick any, is it page 68? That's sorry, last thing I need to confirm. You can choose any of the determinants on page 86. Okay, simply select one of these factors, like the price of inputs. So the price of factors of production goes up. Obviously, that would have a detrimental impact on the supply curve. And then you've got to tell me what would actually happen to it. But if you look at the table on page 86, you'll see everything that you need to there. Guys, we have now come slightly over time, but do you have any questions that I can answer? If you're not comfortable asking me here, please feel free to email me. I will get back to you as soon as I can. Well, once again, where do we find your email? Okay, so let me just pop my email address into the chat for you guys. Andre, if you haven't received an extension, your assignment is due on the 13th. As far as I know, 13th of March. If you have received an assignment, I think the communication you would have received, I think Jolene has actually gone through this whole pathway already, and the easiest way to find the most accurate information is to go directly to VC Assist, and they'll be able to tell you whether you qualify for the extension and when you'll have to submit. Okay, I would suggest, guys, I'll keep using this online lecture link. I do record them automatically, so you should be able to access all the recordings here for now. As soon as I get access to your ARC website, I will post I'll post the access to the YouTube channel as well, which I will also create for us. Yeah, and then I'll send you all the links. Is there a specific format? Zanelli, you use a Word format. There is an assignment template that you can download. looks something like this, but it essentially includes like a cover page for you guys. It also includes, I believe, a declaration to say that obviously everything is your own work. With regards to maximum word count, they say that your maximum word count is 1,000 words. Okay. It should be relatively simple here. Try to keep your explanations quite short and sweet. Again, AIs will be a bit of a detriment in this particular assignment. I find that it's much easier to just go through the textbook. You'll find everything highlighted for you. And if you have any questions, please come to me. All of this should be done in Word with all these graphs. Okay. I'll tell you what, if you want to, guys, if you want to draw the graphs on a separate piece of paper and then just integrate the picture into Word, please feel free to do that as long as it's clear to you guys. If not, look, there are a few ways you can do it as well. Like this is a terrible example. Just open up here. Okay, so there are a few ways you could do it. You could insert a chart and sort of, work your way along the line charts. If not, if you want to just keep it very simple, you can just give me a box. Insert. Okay, insert a line. Other color. Okay, I know the graphs are complicated, but also remember you guys don't have I haven't seen anywhere except for the one question 5.3 where they actually give you a number to work with. Everywhere else, you are simply drawing a version of a graph with no numbers associated to it. Okay, so you can draw any kind of graph you like. Okay, you can put it in the box if you like. If not, sorry, just to give you a quick example of how quickly you can do it. Okay, just a quick text box here to say that this is price and this is quantity, this is demand, this is demand, this is supply, and then where your market equilibrium prices are. Let's see, very quickly. Okay. Price, quantity, and your origin, which is 0. Okay. Then you can just show me demand, demand, supply, supply. And then obviously you just replicate these graphs to move them to the right, to the left. You make them different colors so that they stand out to you more. So you can tell me that this is supply. Oh, sorry, this is demand and the blue is supply. And you simply just use your explanation to explain your graph. Okay, and you can go into some detail with the graph. I understand it's always best to include more information than less. But like I said, what we're most concerned with generally is you have to say shift or movement along the graph and then tell me which graph is being impacted. And then again, what is my market equilibrium price and quantity? If you want to get your lines absolutely straight, just hold down the shift key. Okay, so you can draw your little graphs If you prefer to draw them separately, take pictures and include those in your Word document, then no problem with that either. Okay, when will the ice task become available? Guys, what I would ask you to do, I don't have access as yet, but thus far, because it also aligns so nicely with your assignment, please just go over 2.1.1. Please you don't have to give me, let me just see, I just want to make sure. Yes, this is an explanation, okay? It is tabulated version. So if you want to even just tabulate the version from your assignment and you can incorporate this into your ICE, it just makes it easy for me to make sure that you are, if there's anything specific that we can work on it here, any miscalculations or misunderstandings, we can deal with it on an individual level. And it also gives you notes that you can refer to later on in the semester. Then I'd also like to ask you to do 2.2.1. Again, guys, you have plenty of time to do these. So just 2.1.1, 2.2.1, and 2.3.1. Okay. Those are the only ICE tasks I need you to do for now. We will go into demand and supply and these graphic representations, but a little bit later. And see, production possibility. Oh, yes. And please, okay, I can't actually give it to you yet because I don't have access to your ArcSight. But what I will do, and I will send out an announcement as soon as I can, I will load all your lecture slides, links to our videos, as well as these lecturer resources. Okay, so it's just certain things that I've highlighted from the textbook, little activities that I'd like you guys to do. They are for your benefit. They're just a knowledge check. Obviously, in desperate times, I can use them as ICE tasks, so it's always good to have a few in the bag. But I'm mostly concerned with the lecturer resources from Learning Unit 1 more than the activities. I only need activities from Learning Unit 2 to be done when you guys can, and then as soon as I get access, I'll start marking and giving you some feedback. Any other questions? I hope that answers your question, Danera. Okay, but I will not penalize you guys. I know we've started late. I'm honestly here to help you get through this module as efficiently as possible. So I will send out some extra activities or, send out notifications just so that we can stay on track. But we only need a few through the semester. So as soon as we're all linked up and have gotten through this transition period, we will touch base again and everything will be organized. But until then, I will certainly not be penalizing you guys for ICE tasks. And I will extend any deadlines we have, apart from the assignments and the formatives, which I don't have control of, but any ICE tasks, I will extend deadlines to make it more comfortable for you guys, to accommodate you. Okay. I see Nolwazi. You said you can. Yes, you can, Nolwazi. I'll show you how very quickly. Okay. If you guys are struggling, you can do this. Okay, so you can insert. So let's see. You can insert pictures. So I don't know if you guys have Opera or a way to email. You can either email pictures to yourself and just save them on your computer. Okay, let's just see here. Okay, pictures. Let's see if I've got a graph here. I should have one somewhere. PMIC. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so if you are to draw a graph, you can take a picture of it and email it to yourself. Okay, just attach the email it to yourself, download it onto the device with your assignment on it. Okay. Then you just go to your picture that has been saved on your computer, select the graph, and insert it. Okay. Yeah, of course. Okay, so you can, of course, draw it. You can physically draw it. You can try and draw it in Word. You can draw it in Excel. You can draw it in art. I don't mind. You can take a screenshot and modify something. You can even modify this. For example, okay, I don't mind how you do it. Really, even if you can, I'm not sure how the document works, but you can even take screenshots of pictures and just integrate them into your assignment as well. Um, Anything that works for you guys, I honestly don't mind, and I certainly won't penalize you as long as I can see it and I can mark it. Yeah, we'll make a plan around everything else. Okay, guys, I know I've kept you for 15 extra minutes. Do you have any other questions? Okay, then if you guys are happy, if you are concerned about anything, you do have my email address in the chat. You can come back to this link as well, and it should have our recordings and transcriptions so that you can just refer back if you just need a reminder on anything. Otherwise, if you have any direct questions, please feel free to direct them to me. I know the assignment is due quite soon, so I'll get back to you as soon as humanly possible. And then all the best, guys. I hope you do well. And then I'll see you next week, Tuesday, same place, same link.